Hi, I'm Beth from Sew Country, and today's tutorial is for the Brevity bag. This is the latest pattern from Just an E Patterns. This is a medium-sized bag, and it is simple and quick, but still has an amazing classy look. I think it has really taken up to the next level and given that upscale feel by the addition of the unique hardware. This is a new hardware that just came out. It's by Fireweed Stitches, and you can actually buy it in a kit. So you can buy the Brevity bag kit, and so you can get everything you need. I'm keeping the tutorial simple today, and I won't be sewing any pockets in my bag. You can see it's a very wide open bag. Great storage, but you could easily add pockets into yours. I'm also going to keep it simple by just using a magnetic snap. So we can have this bag cut, sewn, in about an hour or two. So let's get started looking at all the pieces and everything we'll need, and then we'll go through it step by step so you can create your very own Brevity bag. So let's start talking about all the pieces and everything we're going to need. We're going to start going over the hardware first. Like I said, I got the Brevity bag kit from Fireweed Stitches. This has all the hardware in it that I'm going to have to use to make this bag. I did choose to get a brushed copper. I've never had that hardware before, so I was really interested to see it in person, and it's stunning. The first thing I have are those two unique connectors that will go on the side of the bag. So we will have two of those. This will replace things like your D-ring connectors or grommets, things like that. I'm making my strap out of vinyl. In the other bag, I used a chain strap. So for this one, I'm actually going to use these strap ends. So these are brushed copper as well. I have two of those. I have my two magnetic snaps. Let me go ahead and pull those out of there. So you can see those are brushed copper also. And I just have one set of magnetic snaps for the interior side to keep the bag closed. I have two gate rings that will be attached to these connectors for our strap. I have one adjustable bar strap, and then I have two swivel hooks. So that's all the hardware I'll need. Let's go ahead and start talking about the other pieces. Like I said, for my strap, it's going to be made out of vinyl, and it's going to be a 1-inch strap. This is going to be my main exterior piece. This vinyl is from Maple and Sunshine. And then I'm going to have my second main panel be this vinyl from Mormino. For the base, the bottom of the bag, I'll have this piece of vinyl. And then that's all I need for the exterior. So a front and back main panel, and then a bottom. For the lining, all I need is those same pieces. A bottom and a front and a back. For the vinyl, I'm not putting anything on them, no interfacing at all. I'm leaving everything plain. But for my interior, for the bottom, I have a layer of medium weight interfacing. I have a piece of Decaville Heavy. It's kept out of my seam allowance, and then I put a layer of fleece on top of that. So I actually have 3 types of interfacing on here, so it gives it that really firm support to help support the bag. For the lining pieces, I have each of these interfaced with a medium weight interfacing and a layer of fleece. I did choose to keep the fleece out of the seam allowance. That's all I need to make this bag. Super quick, super simple. Let's start prepping everything and get everything ready so we can sew up our bag. To get this pattern started, I'm going to work on my strap first. Pretty simple way to do it, your basic strap. I went ahead and drew a line down the middle. Now I know some people use double-sided tape to get their strap fixed. I don't use that. I just use clips and kind of go the slow way. So if that bothers you, definitely use the double-sided tape. You can use glue. You can use whatever method you prefer. But I'm going to fold the long edges to this line right down the middle, and then I'm going to fold again so that the raw edges are inside completely encased, and then I'll top stitch down both sides. I'll speed this part up just so you're not having to watch through this whole thing in real time, because it does take me a while. I am going to set my strap to the side. I don't need it right now, and I'm going to pull out my 2 lining main panels and also my 2 main exterior main panels. For both of these, I'm going to get them started sewing the same way. My print is directional, so I'm going to make sure it's going the right way. Match these two up, right sides together. I'm going to just clip these together, and then I'm going to sew down both of the sides with the seam allowance given in the pattern. I'll do the same thing for the exterior, and then we will have those pieces started. So there's the lining. Grab out the exterior. Remember to backstitch whenever you start and stop sewing. Now for my lining, I'm going to go ahead and set it aside at this point, but for the exterior, what I'm going to do is I'm going to top stitch down both of these seams. This is going to be a little tricky, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this inside out because I want to top stitch from the exterior so I can watch my stitches perfectly. But since we're top stitching a tube, it's going to be a little slower to do this. If you want to, you can sew one side, open it up, top stitch down that side, and then sew the other side. So you would only be doing the tube one time. You're definitely can do that. But for this, I'm going to show you just one. I'm not going to do it all on camera because it is really slow. So what I'll do is I'll open up my seam. So it's butterflied. So I have one seam allowance going to each side. I'm going to fit it under my needle very carefully. And I'm going to put the foot down, and then what I like to do is I like to stick my other hand up underneath there so I can make sure that I'm feeling everything the entire time to make sure that nothing's getting under that needle, my seam staying open and everything staying perfectly. So it's a slow process, but it can be done. If you have a cylinder arm, of course, it's a lot easier to be done. You do want to be careful with these seams because this will be a feature focus point on your bag whenever you're done. So don't rush this step. So I got the first row of top stitching done. I'm going to make sure that seam stays pushed over into the dark brown side, and I'm going to do the same thing down this seam, top stitching that same way, being very careful. Then I will flip it over and do the same thing on this other seam. Like I said, I'm not going to do all this on camera just so you don't have to wait all this time. When I come back, I will have all the seams butterflied and sewn open. What I've done is I have sewn down both sides of the seam, butterflying that seam open. This is from the wrong side, this is from the right side. I did that on both seams on the exterior, both sides. I did that on both sides of the interior. Once you have all four of those done, the next step is to kind of create your new sides and your new center. You'll use a ruler. I'm not going to put the ruler on camera because I don't like to give out measurements of anything on camera. But what you're going to do is you're going to lay everything flat. Let me get this interior out of the way. So lay your exterior flat, and right here where the seam is, you're going to shift it over. The pattern tells you exactly how far you're going to shift it over. I already have mine marked, so I know. But you measure from the inside of that seam over to this corner. Once you get that proper measurement, the pattern tells us go ahead and put a few clips here to kind of help that bag, the material, know which way to go, and so it can kind of like get flattened out a little bit. Mark both of those side marks on the top and the bottom on both sides, and then you'll also mark your new center marks. Now, I was talking to the designer and I said, I don't need to do this for the interior, correct? Because then my interior's already looking the same. And she reminded me that while I wouldn't have to do it, the reason she wrote it that you do shift the interior also is for when we install that hardware, it kind of keeps the bulk out of the seams, and also we will have to do some cutting when we install that hardware, and if we did the cutting right here on the seam, that would leave that seam vulnerable and it would have a tendency to fray. So I'm going to do that same shift on my lining, that same amount given in the pattern, and I'm going to mark my centers and my sides again. To mark your centers, you could either use a ruler to measure and get the distance, or you can just pull these two sides together and find your center that way, which is what I do on especially things like the lining. With my vinyl, I might need to use the ruler because where it's a little bit bulkier, it might not fold as easily and I might not get as an accurate of a mark as if I'd use the ruler. You want to mark the centers on both sides, top and bottom. Let's see if I can, yeah, it's going to fold. Mine's fine. It's not too bulky, so I'm just going to fold it and do it this way on the exterior as well. Okay, now that I have my exterior and the lining, those quarter and center marks made, everything's ready to go. You'll pull out your base pieces and you're going to make those same marks. You're going to make your side marks. Go ahead and on each side go to the center, make a mark. On the top, go to the center and make a mark. You'll do this on the top and the bottom, on the exterior and the interior. I'm going to use my exterior to make this. My interior is the one that has all the firm stabilizer, so it's a little bit harder to get an accurate fold on it. So I'll just transfer the marks over from my exterior piece. The pattern gives us a measurement as to how far down from this short edge we draw a line. This is going to be our start and our stop point. We're not going to stitch past that line. This is going to be able to allow the bag to have the shape it needs without having any extra bulk in the corners. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the exterior only at this point. I'm going to set the lining aside because I want to add the magnets before I do the lining bottom. So I'm just working with the exterior. I'm going to take this center mark on the long edge and I'm going to match it up with the center mark on the bag. Make sure if your pattern, if your bag's directional and my print is directional, make sure that you're attaching this to the bottom and not to the top. I am just going to put a clip there in the exact center spot, and then I'm going to do a clip on each side just to provide a little bit more stability. And then I'm going to do the other thing, the same thing on the other side. I'm going to sew the long sides first. I'm not even going to clip the short sides just yet. I'm going to leave them completely open and just focus on getting these long sides sewn. So I'll go ahead and finish clipping all the way down to that start and stop point. After we sew these long edges, then we will come back and attach the sides. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to put this under the needle, and we will put our needle down directly on that line we drew. That's where our first stitch is going to be. I'll take a few stitches forward, then I'll take a few stitches back, but I will not allow my stitches to cross that line. That'll be my stopping point. Then I'll sew all the way down with the seam allowance given the pattern until I come to this next mark that I made. I will stop there, I will go back a few stitches, and then come back again to lock those stitches in place. Okay, now I have the long edges attached on the bottom. I'm going to take the short edge, that center mark on the short edge base, and the center mark on the side, it's the side center mark on the bag itself, and put a clip there. Now you can see what's happening. It's not wanting to spread easily. So the pattern suggests we can make a small snip within the seam allowance to help that spread if we need to. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and finish clipping some so I can see where I need to make that snip. So this is what it looks from the back of the bottom side. We are just going to stitch to match up this previous row of stitches. So I'll put my needle here, go forward a few stitches, go back to lock it in, but I won't go any on this side. I'll stitch all the way across till I match this set of stitches. Again, back stitching and not going past this. When we look from this side, I can see that it would help if I did just a small snip in the seam allowance to kind of give this bag a little bit easier way to lay. It's not required. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, you don't have to. But I just feel like it'll open things up a little if I come right here in that area and just do a tiny snip to get it to spread just a little bit more. I feel like it'll help me just get a smoother stitch around there because the vinyl on the bag can spread just a little bit extra. Not required though. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it down this way. I'm going to use my fingers to make sure there's no bumps. I'm not sewing over any bumps. Put my needle down directly where it meets that previous row of stitches. Go forward 2, go back 2, and then continue sewing with the seam allowance, which for me will be directly on that line I just drew. When you're coming up on this other side, remember we're not going past that stitches, but we're also going to use our finger to make sure we're not going to sew over any bumps and that everything's smooth and flat there. This is what it looks like from this side. This is what it looks like from the bottom side. Let's do that same thing over on this side, and then this exterior portion is done and we will start working on the lining. I do have my exterior completely done. If you wanted to trim the seam allowances somewhat, you can, but I'm not going to on this one. Now that we've got the base sewn onto our exterior, we're going to set it aside for a minute. We're going to get everything taken care of with the interior. Before I sew the base on, I want to go ahead and attach my magnets. I'm going to come to the center mark right here, and the pattern tells me how far down I'm going to measure to make the dot for my magnetic snap placement. After I get that dot, I'll take my washer and then I will place it directly on that dot. So my center opening for the magnetic snap is centered on that dot. I'm going to make the 2 slit marks to have those marked. I'm going to take my seam ripper and I'm going to put it at the bottom of that mark I just drew, and it's going to take a little bit of effort to get it going through because, like I said, I have several layers of interfacing here. And then I'm just going to slowly make that slit. I don't want to make it too big. I can always come back and make it bigger if I want, but I couldn't make it smaller. You can use fray check on these slits if you're nervous about fraying. I'm going to take my magnetic snap now, and I am going to go from the exterior side or the right side of the lining and poke through the prongs, those slits I made. Then I will take the washer and put it on. I choose to take my prongs to the outside. These magnetic snaps are extremely heavy duty. If you're used to using the ones from Amazon or something, you're going to notice a huge difference. So I used to do the Amazon ones with my fingers, but the prongs on this one are so well made that I have to use my table, that I press them open. If you wanted to, if you're concerned, you can put a piece of masking tape over this, but I feel like it's going to be fine. I don't feel any rough edges, so I feel good with that. So there's the one magnetic snap. I went ahead and already made the other one. You can go ahead and have those done, and then After we've attached this magnetic snap, what I'm going to do now is I am going to use the pattern measurements, and it tells me how far down I am going to fold the top edge. This bag is going to be constructed as a drop-in lining, but we are leaving the exterior, or at least I am, since my exterior is a non-fraying edge, I'm leaving it alone. I'm not doing anything. But my lining, it is a fraying material. So I'm going to use the pattern measurements, and I'm going to fold down that raw edge so I have a finished edge all along the top, and that'll be what I attach to the exterior bag. Now, this will make the lining just a little bit shorter, which is perfectly fine. I much prefer a lining that is going to fit nicely in there without a lot of bunching and like bubbling and bulking, and so this will be really good to have a really nicely fitting lining. Drop-in linings are my favorite linings to do, honestly. So go ahead and continue clipping around, making sure that you are using the pattern measurements to have it even. At this point, I have both my exterior and my lining completed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my exterior right sides out, and I'm going to drop in the lining. Then I will just sew around the top perimeter, matching everything up and attaching the two. Take the time to poke out your corners on the bottom so you have a really nice rectangle base there. I'll also kind of go in and kind of smash those seams flat. After you finish sewing, you could always put some clips in there if you feel like it needs a little more extra training on the seams, but for me right now, this is all I'm going to do. Okay, now we're going to decide which way we want our front. I want this my front, definitely, so I'm going to sew it that way. It's not really a big deal at this point still, but just for my mindset, I'm going to have it. Okay, now I'm just going to slide in, just drop in that lining. I'm going to match up all the marks that I had previously made. I'm going to go ahead and unsnap those magnets. So matching up the seams first on the exterior and the lining. If your exterior is a fraying exterior, you would have to roll down that seam, but where mine is vinyl, it's going to be just fine. I'm just peeking up my lining to see where that mark is so I can match them up perfectly. Now that I have those marks clipped, the center marks, the seams, all of that, I'm just going to finish clipping all the way around. Okay, you can see I have my lining just barely under. I don't want it showing from my exterior, so I have it just not flush, just slightly under the exterior. And so when I sew that, I'll kind of keep that in mind and kind of keep it pushed down just a little bit, not even 1/16 of an inch, just slightly under, so it's not like really obvious when you're looking at the exterior of the bag. If you're concerned, you could flip this whole thing inside out and top stitch from your exterior. I'm just going to go slow and be careful, and I feel like I can keep a proper seam allowance on this. I'm going to go all the way around with the seam allowance given in the pattern, making a note to make sure that the lining stays the way I want. It's not going to slip down or slip up, so I'm going to go slow. I'm not rushing any of these steps. And I'm just going to sew around the entire perimeter, of course, back stitching where I start and stop. At this point, my back is finished. The only thing I have left to do is to attach my hardware on the sides and to finish up my strap. When we go to install the special hardware, the double D rings on this bag, first thing we'll do is we'll use the pattern measurements as to how far in and how far down we're going to make a line to kind of draw a little box here. And then what we're going to do now is if we get the box drawn on both sides, I know you can't see it really well on camera, but I do have that drawn on. What we're going to do is we're going to go over to the machine. We are going to sew on the outside of that line. So instead of sewing directly on this line, we're going to just sew maybe a 1/16 of an inch on the outside of that line so that we'll be able to cut directly on the line and those stitches will still remain intact. If you want to put your finger in here to make sure everything is nice and smooth and there's no puckering so you can sew over everything easily, you can do that. Make sure you back stitch whenever you start and stop. After we have the stitches sewn, then what we're going to do is we're just going to cut through all the layers. I know it's a little stressful on the line that you previously drew. You're going to try to make sure you don't get into the stitches you just sewed, but I'll be really going careful. My material is kind of thick and my scissors, even though they're good ones, are kind of struggling a little with this vinyl. So now I cut those boxes out of both sides. I did not go into the stitches, but I got as close as I could. So I went ahead and installed the first connector on. This vinyl is thicker than this vinyl, so this one was harder for me to do. I'm going to show you how to do this, but the thing is, it's really hard to put this on and have it in front of the camera like this. I really need to pull it close to me to be able to do it. So I won't be able to show you all of it once I get it completely in line. But what I do is I take this corner and I simply slide it on there. That part's going to go pretty easily. Just slides on through there. Now, if you're having trouble with the vinyl kind of popping out, you can use your seam ripper or stiletto to kind of poke it in. But whenever you come up to get this part in, it does require a little bit more strength to push it in there. Okay, at this point I just had this little bit more left, but I'm going to have to pull it close to me to do it. So whenever I come back, I will finish it. But after I pull it close to me, I will just install the 4 screws that's provided in the kit, and then that part will be done. So I was able to get both of the pieces of hardware on. Sorry I couldn't show it. It was just there's no way I could do it at the angle that the camera needs to view. I needed to have it closer to me. So now I'm going to put the gate rings on here. Gate rings have the kind of, the gate. They're different from O-rings in that they have that gate. So I'm going to slide them on there, and this is what the swivel hook will actually attach to. And I decided for my strap, after looking at the length, it really doesn't need an adjustable bar, so I'll save that for when I do need one. My strap is kind of short. It's not that long, so it'll be perfect for just a shoulder strap anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide on my swivel hooks for this. And then I'm going to slide on the little strap ends. And these do have 2 screws to attach as well. So this just slides in there, and then I'll use a screw to secure it in place. Okay, so now that I have my strap ends on, what I'll do is I will pull down a swivel hook. And I'm just going to bend it over a little bit, and then you can either rivet or sew, and I'm just going to sew that down. And now my Brevity bag is done. Just going to clip on my strap. Now, if you've watched my other tutorials, you know I'm someone that's not big on lots of hardware. I don't use it a lot, but this was fun to get to try out some new pieces of hardware. Definitely adds a unique look to the bag. I'm really glad I did it, and I think it's fun to sometimes kind of play around and do different things and not always do the same thing. So this is the Brevity bag from Just-A-Knee. This hardware kit is from Fireweed Stitches, and I'm going to have both of these linked in my description. And I hope that you guys take the time to try something new today in your sewing room, kind of branch out and look at some new techniques or some new hardwares, whatever you're in the mood for. And I hope you also have a great day sewing. Thank you so much for watching.